It's all too easy to use sport as a metaphor in business, looking for obvious lessons that can be taken from what happens on pitches and tracks, the resilience required by athletes, and the collaboration of teams. But as we approach a huge summer of sport, the focus of what happens on our screens rarely references the people behind the scenes, the ones preparing a city or a nation to host a huge event. So let's take the Olympics. The National Olympic Committees don't just roll into town and book their athletes into a local hotel. The host city have 7 years to prepare. But what happens in that time, and how sustainable is it? Today, we're joined by the Director of Strategic Programmes from London 2012 to understand just what it takes to be part of the Organising Committee of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and just what we can learn from them. So, welcome to In Good Company, Sue Hunt. What a delight it is to have you here with us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Dan. Great to be with you.
Well, it's a delight to have you here, and thank you ever so much for giving up some of your time. We start these interviews always the same, which is to ask our guests to introduce themselves in 60 seconds.
Wow, that's no pressure then. So I'm a non-executive director of Impact, as you know, an organisation I love, and I work with them because I think they're great and I love the people. I grew up in the Lake District with a school motto of aim high and a sense of adventure and a yearning to travel. So I became a chartered accountant, which gives you a passport to do that, which is great. Emigrated to Australia, worked out there, went overland there and back. Joined Goldman Sachs Investment Bank in London when I returned and worked with them for 20 years and was international treasurer for 7 years of those. And then my dream job came along, director of strategy for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2012. So that's my background.
Amazing. Yeah, well, we've got lots to learn from you about your career, but obviously particularly we're focusing in on your work with the Olympics. So maybe the next thing to do then is to kind of give us a bit of an overview as your role of, and it's fairly wordy, so I'll try and get this all right, the Director of Strategic Programmes at the London Organising Committee of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. It's quite a mouthful, isn't it? So yeah, give us a bit of an overview of what you did then. Yeah, doesn't it?
It flows off the tongue, doesn't it? Yeah, so I was recruited into this role, Director of Strategic Programmes. As you said, it was with LOCOG, which is the London Organising Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I stress that because we ran both. So I joined with 5 years to go to the Games into that role. And my remit was to oversee all the programmes to deliver the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2012, which is quite a big job in itself. But within 3 months of joining the organising committee, I took on all the remit of the chief operating officer and ran everything from accreditation, cleaning, waste, transport, security, logistics, right the way through to international relations, until such time as we could recruit in the appropriate experts to do all of those roles. So it was quite a mixed set of responsibilities.
Yeah, just a bit. And from what I can gather, stakeholder management was kind of key in your role doing this job. And so you kind of were overseeing stakeholder relations, program management, and business planning. I suppose I can't quite imagine the complexity of this stakeholder interface. So how did you approach this? Was it possible to maybe learn from previous games, or I kind of envisage, was there some form of handover, or maybe that wasn't something you were part of if you kind of joined a bit later into it, but was there even a spirit of collaboration?
Oh yeah, well that's quite a lot of questions in one. So let me try and sort of break that down. So yes, it's complicated and there's a lot of stakeholders. So you start off really with the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee, and learn from all of their experience from doing games to games. There's definitely a spirit of collaboration because there is a responsibility, if you like, to pass on that knowledge from games to games to games.
Yeah.
I sort of, when I took on the role, thought thought there would be this sort of big manual that was handed to me, and that would tell me exactly what I needed to do or when I needed to do it. But of course, it doesn't work that way, because even though you do the same thing from games to games in terms of running sport, for example, the way you interpret what you want to do as a country or in the city that you're in is very, very different. And that's where you get a very much more complex set of stakeholders. And I'll just give you, for example, the torch relay as an example, because we in London 2012 decided we wanted the torch relay to go all around the country, and everyone in the country should be 90 minutes away from seeing the torch by public transport. So that, of course, meant that every nation and region of the country was involved with running it. And throughout the time I was working on the Games, we had obviously a massive stakeholders you dealt with, right down to individual council level, as to how that torch would get around the country and have the experience we would like it to be for all the spectators seeing it on its route. So that just gives you a sense of just looking at one aspect of what we had to do, the number of stakeholders. But in terms of looking at it as a whole, we defined the main stakeholder groups, if you like, from the top down. And then as you develop the operational plans, more stakeholders at a detailed level emerged. And we had to sort of connect the two up and make sure we did a good job of communicating right the way through to every stakeholder group. Quite a complex exercise in itself. The other thing to mention is the International Olympic Committee and Paralympic committees expected us to orchestrate that. They didn't want to have to deal with any of the local governments or the central governments. It was our responsibility to do that on their behalf to make sure the Games ran. So I had quite a big remit in terms of dealing across government departments as well as local councils.
Yeah, I mean, just to think that the torch relay was just one part of the whole Games, and the Games being massive. And I suppose, what other detail did it go down to? Did it go down to like were you involved in, I mean, I know in the opening ceremonies and the closing ceremonies and all of that aspect of it as well, that was all part of it, or was that and then part of other teams or something?
No, I was in, my role was overseeing all of that, everything we needed to do to deliver the Games. So it wasn't, people think of it as just a sporting event starting with the opening ceremony, but it's actually not. I mean, in the 5 years leading up to the Games, there was that I was involved with it. There's a lot that needs to be done, not least taking people to the previous Games, in our case, Vancouver and Beijing, to learn everything we could and bring back knowledge. But also we were running events. You do what they call test events. So effectively, at Games time in the Olympics, we were running the equivalent to 26 simultaneous world championships, if you like, and then 20 for the Paralympics. But each one of those had been tested in some form prior to 2012. So you've already run a number of major sporting events in the lead up to the Games. And I think that's something people don't actually understand or appreciate. So those are the sorts of things you are doing to make sure that when it comes to in our case 2012, it all ran smoothly.
The pressure that you must have felt, I would imagine, like trying to get everything absolutely nailed to deliver something that's kind of seen on a global scale and seen by millions around the world. I suppose that as well adds a bit of a added complexity. And also there was kind of events that happened through that time as well. So, for example, because of course we mentioned that between the 7 years between getting nominated as the city to run the Games, and then of course a lot can happen in the time leading up to it, with, I suppose, between us getting the bid and then it running. There was the the global financial crisis, of course. So like, and then since then we've seen the pandemic. So the organisers of the last games and the forthcoming one have experienced all of that, and then also, of course, significant conflict. So huge kind of changes in that time and ongoing. In your experience, how can you mitigate risk on projects before they happen? What did you kind of do was there anything that you could do?
Well, as you rightly point out, there was all sorts of things happened. I mean, sadly, the country rejoiced when we won the bid for 2012. And the very next day, there was a terrorist attack in London, which is really obviously a terrible thing. So that's a very sobering thing to think about and plan for those types of events. So, yeah, we had to think a lot of things. First of all, the financial risk, because the organising committee actually, contrary to popular opinion, is a privately funded organisation, and we have to raise funds to be able to run the games. And the main sources of income are sponsorship, broadcasting, and ticketing. So the first thing to do is try and secure your financial position. And of course, we had a financial crisis in 2008. So we were a little bit worried that we wouldn't be able to raise the sponsorship that we needed to. So that was a priority, to get onto that very, very quickly and make sure that we gave ourselves some form of financial security to be able to run the games that we put into the big commitments when we won it. So that big focus on that. Operational risk, a lot of detailed planning goes into that. I've already mentioned the test events that we run. So you do everything you can to eliminate the operational risk by running sort of the games in a way that you will be operating them at the real games time. So that's a big thing. And then, as I mentioned, terrorism, there's a lot of grave stuff that you actually have to think about, what if situations. And we work very closely with all of the security and emergency services and did a lot of scenario planning of all the things that could potentially happen. And I must admit, as a former accountant and investment banker, I was alarmed at times by some of the things I found myself involved with. You just couldn't imagine that you would even need to contemplate them. But they're things that had to be done to make sure we were prepared in the event that something happened at games time. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes over and above the great opening ceremonies that you see and the sporting events that you witness.
I mean, I can imagine, having to have conversations about, what to do in the event of something incredibly serious during the games time, as you say, must be quite sobering. Well, will have been quite sobering, I would have thought.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So it's fascinating, and I would imagine that if anything did happen, it was dealt with quickly and efficiently enough that nobody even noticed. I can't picture anything that happened, but I would imagine that it was all dealt with and in hand.
Unfortunately, a lot of the things that we did do the scenario plan for never happened. But there's always, when you've got, so for example, the opening ceremony, I was overseeing international relations for the games at games time. And you've got to remember there's over 200 heads of state, heads of government there at the opening ceremony of London 2012's Olympics. That was at the time the biggest ever meeting of heads of state, heads of government in the world. So just even planning for that is quite a big exercise. And I spent a lot of time liaising with all of the embassies in London over how all of that would work. And we also had to treat each of the countries represented in very equal terms. And you can imagine that, say, the Americans would want to have more of an entourage for their head of state than perhaps a smaller country. And so there was a lot to work through, as you can imagine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I could ask you loads of really detailed questions, but I'm not sure how much what value would gain from that. But I'm just in my so I out of interest, how big a team were you involved with, and I guess did you look after?
Okay, so at the start, 5 years to go to the games, I had 2 people,
Right.
and at Games time, 6,000.
Right. That's a fair jump, isn't
And
it?
the organising committee, when I joined, was about 60 people. And at Games time, we had 200,000 people in the workforce.
Yeah.
So, and again, you have to plan for that. Growing an organisation from pretty much nothing,
Yeah.
with the few people that stayed on from the bid, to a major functioning organisation in a number of years, and then dissolving it. Remember that it's a temporary
Yeah, of
thing.
course. Yeah.
Is a big exercise, and a lot of that 200,000 were volunteers.
Yeah.
So it was, and it's often referred to, the Olympics and Paralympics, as the biggest logistical exercise in peacetime, and just sort of recruiting 200,000 people in that time frame, and getting them all ready is quite a big exercise in itself.
And in terms of, I mean, you went from two in a team to 6,000.
Yeah.
Does it? And as you say, kind of growing this organization, because let's face it, that's what it is. Does it have the similar sort of functions? Like, does it have an HR function, for example? Like, does it build itself into the same way as we would have an organization as we would normally think about it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We had the HR department was a significant part, because you imagine all the recruitment that was taking place.
Yeah.
And we had a legal team, we had an accounting team, all the things you'd expect to see in a normal corporate, really.
Well, with that in mind, then that kind of leads me nicely onto my next question, which was, engagement it would have been a massive part of it. So, what tips do you have for engaging people on a large scale?
Oh, this is a tough one, isn't it? And as I've already explained, we were quite a unique organisation in the way we grew, the size it became, and then the fact it was completely dissolved. But one thing that's common throughout, I think, is communication. So making sure that everybody knew where they fitted into the organisation, what their purpose was, what their individual contribution would be to the overall success of the Games. And we did have this mantra, about which we stole actually from GB rowing, which was as simple as, will it make the boat go faster? So whenever people were stuck or didn't know what decision to make, or they were trying to prioritize, then we always used to throw that question back: will it make the boat go faster? And having something as simple as that penetrates through the organization, and having a clear set of values that everyone could relate to, is very powerful. But we also had the benefit as an organization, people really wanted to be there. They really wanted to be part of it. And this is something we refer to as the gold dust we had, that people really, really were motivated to work there and to do their best, and to ensure that, again, living to one of our quotes that we always had, inspire to make change through the Games. So it was quite a rare experience, but one that was really exciting to be part of. And it's really sad when it's over. The other thing we had to manage was, knowing it's going to come to an end, and it's such an incredible experience. So there was quite a big focus on making sure that we looked after the people that worked with us, and that we helped them manage that process.
Yeah. And of course, you spend a whole heap of time with people for a good few years, and then, as you say, unless you continue to work with these people in another world, in another job, but you kind of say goodbye to a lot of people at the end of it as well. It made as you were talking there, it made me kind of think that must go on in like the film industry all the time, where you start big projects, work with people for a good couple of years, like you say, build up a whole team of people, and then move on to the next project. It must be very strange. It must be a strange way of having relationships, but I guess if you get used to it.
You build an incredible network, though, Dan, and you do come across the people time and time again in different walks of life. The
Yeah.
great thing about the Olympics and Paralympics as well is that you work with people from all different backgrounds and disciplines and nationalities, and you do end up with an incredible network at the end of it.
Absolutely. Did you have a favourite moment of the Olympics that you could pinpoint, or?
Oh, goodness me. There's so many. I mean, for me, the opening ceremony was one, definitely, of the
Yeah.
Olympics, because there was always the anxiety about how that was going to work, and also having the 200 heads of state, heads of government there.
Yeah.
And then to see how that was received was, really motivating. And then, of course, when the sport started to happen, then Team GB did well, and Super Saturday happened, and we started winning gold medals at quite a pace. That was a tremendous moment for me as well. Yeah.
And you're clearly quite the sports fan from your background, I guess. Would that be fair to say?
Oh yeah, I love pretty much all aspects of sport, and I'm a real fan of Paralympic sport now, having worked with it. And that was another
Yeah.
special moment for me, was being having the honour actually to do the ceremonies to present the medals and flowers to the athletes at Paralympics, which was quite something.
Yeah, I bet it was. The I as you were talking there, I've been kind of reminiscing, I suppose, about the opening ceremony. Of course, I think I ended up watching it a couple of times, back on YouTube and things like that, because it was just, there were so many different. It was so involved and so massive a production. I mean, I suppose, what a highlight, of course, is the Queen skydiving out the plane and parachuting into the stadium. It was it was just a complete spectacle, and just a really a kind of emotional way of starting the games. Like, how much involvement did you have with that then? With that particular part of it?
Well, I mean, I was, as I said, I was overseeing all of the delivery, so I worked closely with the people doing the opening ceremony.
Yeah.
But even so, there's still parts of it that were kept secret from me.
Oh,
Um,
really? Right.
yeah, because we obviously wanted to make sure there was a complete element of surprise on the day. Um,
Yeah.
but I did a bit of a sneak preview about the Queen jumping out of the helicopter.
Yeah, it certainly. Well, that was certainly a surprising moment, I think, for a lot of people. Just even the Queen being involved in it, I think, was quite a surprising moment for people. So it was incredibly well done.
Yeah.
It was. So it's certainly a good memory of mine of the games, for sure. I would imagine that a lot of this role will have come with its certain level of overwhelm. There's a phrase that a colleague of mine uses, which is "Don't try to eat the whole elephant," which I believe is based on a quote from Desmond Tutu. And so, I talk me through. Did you experience days of overwhelm? How did it affect? How did you manage this personally? Um, did you experience that at all?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I can remember getting the job and thinking, "Wow, this is great." And then the
Yeah,
next day thinking, "Oh my goodness, how the heck am I gonna deliver this?" Especially, you've got no team, you've got very little budget, and there's a lot to do. Um, but it's like anything, you can break it down into parts, and then suddenly it becomes more manageable. So one thing that happened very early on in my time there was we sat down and we developed this overall scope for delivering the games. So it was like all the sports we had to deliver, all of the services we needed to deliver it, all the venues we had to deliver them in, all the stakeholders that need to be involved, and all the infrastructure we need to put in place to deliver it. And we thought we were pretty proud of ourselves for this, and we were actually quite surprised that this had never been done before for a previous games. And that scope really helped then develop the, if you like, the overall roadmap to delivering the games. and what the key milestones were. And once you had all of that framed out, it became much, much easier to make sure that you didn't have scope creep and you didn't go beyond your remit and that you did deal with the right people. So I think that was a really helpful thing to do early on. And then it was a question of just making sure you check in all the time and you're keeping to plan. And we had this really useful discipline. Every 6 months anyway, we had to meet with the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee to make sure we're on track. And that was a very effective tool for making sure we were doing everything we're supposed to, but also to get our stakeholders to do it. Because often they would fear having to stand up in front of the International Olympic Committee or Paralympic Committee and say that they couldn't do something for some reason. So there's lots of things you could do. And it's just making sure that you do things in manageable parts and that
manageable chunks.
And then you feel like you're delivering something. That almost makes you feel good. And we had lots of milestones along the way to know that we were delivering.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it, breaking it down into small chunks. Hey, I was just kind of thinking while you were talking there about, we as you well know at Impact do a lot of our core is around experiential learning, and I was just curious, what would you say if anything that you learned from the experience of doing that role that you did? Was there a particular thing that you kind of came away with and applied to the next thing you did?
Oh gosh, there were so many things. Well, I definitely learned that even though I thought I'd operated in a diverse environment before I joined to do the Olympics, I certainly hadn't. And there was, as I've already mentioned, there were so many people that I worked with that were from different backgrounds, different disciplines, different nationalities. And then, of course, we were delivering the games in communities in London surrounding the Olympic Park. They're the most diverse communities we have in the country. And so I really learned that I had quite a sort of, I think, blinkered existence in the roles I had before. And I learned an awful lot about humility and dealing with lots of diverse groups in the roles that I did. And I also got a huge amount out of that. So I think one of the main things I learned was to be humble and to enjoy and learn from working with lots of different types of people and lots of different age groups of people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny you mention that because, of course, we have focused on the Olympics as a sort of a major part of your career, but I suppose in terms of length of time and more of a perhaps major part of your career was your 20 years at Goldman Sachs, as you mentioned earlier on. And as part of that, if I understand correctly, you kind of led the bank's efforts to introduce the euro and were recognised for your diversity initiatives. So what I suppose maybe what did the world of sport learn or what can it learn from business or vice versa about improving diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging as it's now termed?
Yeah, it has a long title as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what can be learned? I don't know if sport learns from business or business learns from sport. But one thing I think is true in both is it doesn't just happen, is what I'd say. It's something you have to work at. I think any organisation that thinks things will just happen, if we recruit a more diverse group of people, then things will just happen and we don't need to worry about it. I mean, one thing we really focused on big time for the Olympics and Paralympics was diversity and inclusion throughout. And that wasn't just in terms of how we approached recruiting people. It's about what their experience was like of working with us. And then we also introduced it through every operational aspect of what we did. So that would be from how we designed the uniforms to what was it like entering a venue. So that was quite a new approach again for the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee. And I think that really paid dividends in terms of the experience that people had working on the games and also what the public face of the games looked like. And I sort of feel there's something to be learned in business from that. Don't just think if you recruit a diverse group of people that your profit margins are going to go up.
Yeah.
Profit is better in organisations that are diverse, but it's probably more as a result of what it's like working in the organisations once you're there, and think about every aspect of your operation and how you can incorporate every aspect of diversity and inclusion in that.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. That cultural aspect of feeling included within an organization, no matter where you kind of sit culturally, your performance is going to be better in a place that you feel wanted and welcomed. Right? It's just got to. It just makes total sense.
And where you see
So
people,
yeah, to be able to nurture that.
people like yourself as well, often your performance is happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's ultimately going to, I guess, have a knock-on effect and reverberate throughout the entire culture of the organization, I would think, or you'd like to think so. So yeah, but I agree with what you're saying. That doesn't necessarily just happen naturally. I think there's got to be that active approach to making sure that can happen. So yeah, I mean, what a conversation. We've learned so much, and I kind of want to close off. We've got a couple of questions left. I guess talking about legacy, because of course London 2012 was groundbreaking for so many reasons. With the addition of women's boxing, women competed in all of the sports for the first time, as far as I understand. And it's I've also learned that it was the most watched TV event in American history. And for the first time, it was broadcast on YouTube. So loads of things just even there. But from your perspective, what would you say was the greatest legacy of the Games?
Again, there's many. I mean, for a start, in London, it was the opportunity to redevelop a whole part of East London and create the first time we've created a major park in London for since pretty much Victorian times. So that was pretty special. And the fact that you can go there now and see the park and it's blooming, that it's communities are flourishing in that area and the sporting venues are being used. I mean, so all that physical stuff is a major legacy. One thing that we wanted to see happen, there was is more of an uptake in sport. I don't know how much that is actually paid dividends, but it is good still to go around the country and see playgrounds that have been renovated, sports equipment that's there, all as a result of 2012. So I hope that encourages more people into sport. But I think the thing for me, and you mentioned the fact it was the first digital games, I actually think it's the more that we made it a games for everyone. And even if you didn't get a ticket, you still got a chance to experience it at a different level. And I think that was a major legacy. And that meant that so many people had a very positive experience of 2012. And even now, I hear sometimes people talking about the fact that they saw the road, the bike race, or that they saw they went to the park or they went to a live site and it was an incredible experience. And I just love hearing those stories about the positive experiences of being part of what we put on in London 2012. And if I had a wish, I'd like to come back and live the year of 2012 again and be out there amongst the spectators and the public and see what it was like to experience it from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, again, as you were talking there, there's at least two people from here that that I know that volunteered during the Games, and they talk about it as if it was one of the best life moments they've had, you know.
Yeah.
And so obviously an enormous sense of pride to be, and I would imagine you regularly feel an enormous sense of pride from being involved in something that was so special for not only the country but from a wider aspect as well. So yeah, super amazing. And I think as we kind of mentioned right at the intro, the that that feeling of working on something that and it was, you used the GB, rowing doesn't make the boat go faster, and I also thought, you know, you totally used your motto from when you were younger of the aim high, because you know the without that kind of approach you wouldn't have ended up with something as massive and as groundbreaking as it was. So yeah, an amazing something to be proud of, I would think. Um, yeah, I guess at this point we always ask our guests the same question to kind of round things off, which is to, if you were to start your career again, and maybe this is just for that particular project, but if we'll keep it consistent. If you were to start your career again, what would be the best piece of advice you would give yourself?
I think the best piece of advice is believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, other people won't. And I'd also say don't
Yeah,
be put off by people telling you not to do things or saying a challenge is too big. Just go for it anyway. You'll be
yeah,
surprised what you can achieve. And then
amazing.
you mentioned my school motto. It has to be that one too, doesn't it? Aim high, aim high.
Yeah, it certainly set you in good stead. And at this point, I usually kind of challenge the guests and just kind of throw it back to you. Well, you clearly still do, but do you still live by those kind of values?
I really hope so. I mean, I don't feel I'm done yet, Dan. I think I've still got some great stuff in me ahead.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it for 1 second. Well, so that's been absolutely amazing. Thank you ever so much for giving us some of your time to kind of have a lovely conversation about the kind of inner workings and learnings that can be had from organising an Olympic Games. It's certainly no mean feat. So that's for sure. Well, that just leaves me to thank Sue again for joining us today. I've had a great time having a chat with her. And if you'd like to learn any more about either Impact, or if you want to connect with either myself or Sue on LinkedIn, then you'll find all of those links that you need in the description. And of course, if you haven't yet seen some of our previous episodes, then you'll be able to find those on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you find your podcast. So thank you once again to Sue Hunt for joining us today. And until the next time, take care.